This is Ayanni.
And this is Corinne.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
Welcome to our second episode on Bridgerton Season 3. Picking up where we left off, we jump right into close reading Polin's main sex scenes.
From there, we think about what made us adore the side plots this season through discussions of Benedict, Francesca, and Violet's storylines.
Which of these characters do you want to spend time with on Bridgerton Season 4? Let us know on Instagram or Threads at SexLoveLit and on Tumblr at SexLoveLitPodcast.
And while you're doing that, don't forget to subscribe to and rate our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms.
All right, let's dive in. Hello, dearest gentle listeners. Welcome back to our discussion of Bridgerton Season 3. How are you doing, Ayanni?
I'm doing okay. Unlike Netflix, we did not take a month break between recording the
it's been
first
about
episode.
5 minutes for us.
Yeah.
So
We did refresh our water. I might have eaten a pretzel, So I'm feeling pretty good. Why don't we do a really super quick round of what's sparking joy so that more joy can be sparked before we get right back into talking about sex, because we've got some more sex feelings to share. This would not be sex literature if there were not some sex feelings. So I'm assuming you listened to...
Okay, some sex feelings.
I was just trying to blow by it, but sure, okay, fine. We'll linger in it. I'm sure you listened to our last episode before coming to this one, so we don't necessarily need to do the same run through of what Sparking Joy is, and I think we could just get right into it. So, Corinne, what are we doing for this little mini What's Sparking Joy?
We're going to talk about something that we are specifically listening to that is sparking joy for us. So for me, something that I've been listening to a lot lately, I know I'm late, but it takes me a while to warm up to albums sometimes, but I have been listening to Taylor Swift's Tortured Poets Department. And different songs sort of take over my brain at different points in time. But right now, the one that I have on repeat is Black Dog.
Okay. So a little opposite from Corinne, I have been tagging albums that are dropping that I want to hear right away on Spotify. So I get alerts as soon as they come out. And Kaytranada recently released his new album, Timeless, which has been on rotation for me right now. I love Kaytranada. There are many songs that I have that I've saved that I've been like, oh look, produced by Kaytranada. Who knew? Me, I did. That's why I love it. But the song that's really standing out to me right now on this album, which says disc 1 and disc 2, and I'm kind of like, are there really 2 discs? Like if I bought the CD, I don't know, or bought the record.
Taylor Swift has a part 1 and a part 2 that I think would maybe be on disc 1 and disc 2 if I were to buy the album.
Okay. So I'm going to assume that there are actual physical discs. But towards the end of disc 1, he has a song with Anderson .Paak and Sir called Due to Me, which I am obsessed with. And I listened to it 4 times while cooking dinner the other day. So that's at the top of my list. There's a lot of good ones, though, on this album. If you're into Kaytranada, it's a good one to listen to.
All right.
So that's been What's Sparking Joy, a mini round, but now you have some fun things to listen to.
Yeah, I'm sure people have never heard of Taylor Swift before. I've blown their minds with that one.
I was going to say, you were definitely in your white girl bag with that one, Corinne. What's sparking joy for me? Taylor Swift.
So really quickly, something that is very funny to me is I'm not really a Swiftie. Swifties are on another level. I listen to Taylor Swift sometimes, and this actually is very funny. I listen to so much Spotify that I am normally in her top 1.5% of listeners, but she's not in my top 5 artists. So that's more.
That is funny.
That is more of a statement on me than it is on Taylor Swift. But people always assume that I am a Swiftie. I've had people in the airport in line talk to me about Taylor Swift at security. I would like to talk to them about my favorite song from Midnights.
It's funny because if they knew you, I'm like, girl, Taylor Swift is not on a C-drama album, so Corinne's not gonna want to talk about it. Maybe if you'd come in with Blackpink, she would have had something to say. But, like, you know.
That's true, I would.
Mm-hmm.
But, actually, I can use Taylor Swift and Midnight as a way to get back to our topic at hand.
Oh, look at you.
Because, actually, one of my favorite covers this season on Bridgerton was the Snow on the Beach by Taylor Swift and Lana Del Rey that they have in the scene at the ball where Colin interrupts Lord Doubling and Penelope. That's the song they're dancing to before Colin and Penelope's carriage scene. So Taylor Swift is relevant.
Well, boom. There you go. Well done. Great segue. Though I also will say I did really enjoy the music of this season of Bridgerton. I kind of want to listen to the soundtrack.
Yeah, just the vibes of Bridgerton, I think, have really, like, they're really working. Like, the costumes, they're a little bit softer and I think more romantic now. The Vitamin String Quartet covers, the sets, like, those have always been very, very pretty, but, like, they're really in, like, a good groove, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. There was a period of time where I was listening to, like, the Queen Charlotte soundtrack a lot. So I'll probably have a little bit of Bridgerton season 3 soundtrack time this year. But anyhow, you segued us so beautifully and I just started talking about music and threw it all off. I am so sorry. But going back to the carriage scene, I think it might be good to think a little bit about how that scene works, right? We did talk a bit about how it works for us, but just thinking about, like, I don't know, narratively, how it's constructed. Is that something, would you like to talk about that a little bit, or am I?
Yeah, I mean, so I think maybe just to start off, something that I really like and appreciate that they did this season that is relevant the whole time, but is particularly relevant in the sex scenes between Penelope and Colin, are that Nicola Coughlan, while a beautiful woman, is not like the skinny, conventionally attractive main character that, like, we've had in other seasons, and she doesn't have the type of body that we normally see. So I guess the first thing that I appreciate that the show did not do is make her lose weight for this season. Because in the books, she loses weight, and that's part of what makes Colin find her attractive.
Oh, boo! Boo! Okay.
So even before we get into it, I do want to acknowledge that I am delighted and relieved that the show did not do that.
Oh, yeah, that would have been gross. No. But you were thinking more that she's shown as desirable. There's a desiring gaze that is thrown upon her, right? And in these sex sequences, I've read some commentary, not about this show, but like other stories that have, like, fat women as the main love interest, that when people are not doing it right or doing it well, there's a lot of focus on, like, oh, he loves me despite my curves and that kind of stuff. And that's not how it was played here, right?
Okay, yeah.
And one of the things that stood out to me in this scene, right, is it is explicit through gesture, but we don't actually see a lot.
Yeah,
right?
It's not really... Okay, it's explicit that, like, Penelope has an orgasm. That's explicit.
Which, we know on this show, we support women having orgasms.
Yes.
So, boom. That was great.
And that, like... Okay, also just, like, a thing that I noticed, like, a lot is that, like, Colin's, like, instinct... A, he is a boobs man. Like... B, but he seems very motivated to, like, get Penelope off, like, in general. Like, even when they are making out on the street, he, like, his hand goes, like, right up her dress. Yeah, and I remember being like, Colin, you're outside.
Nah, man, when it's time, it's time. You know what? It's funny. I have a lot to say about Colin, or a lot I could say about Colin, but I support how in favor he was of getting her off. Like, her pleasure was paramount. I mean, and I'm laughing and I'm being silly, but, like, I think that's important, right? It wasn't that he was like, oh yeah, I'm throwing up this dress and I'm getting that pussy, right? He was their whole first sexual interaction was about him bringing pleasure to her, which I'm wondering if, one, that's influenced a bit by his travel, right?
Yeah. So another thing, which I guess is distracting maybe a little bit from, like, Colin and Penelope's sex scenes, but we do see that Colin is very experienced at this point because he has, like, the recurring appointment with the two sex workers,
right?
For some reason. Which,
he makes friends everywhere.
Yeah, sure. That's what we could call them. Which, like, was actually maybe... I got more of why they included that when we saw the second half of the season. And I think it was maybe in contrast to Benedict's threesome that we will get to later. But, like, yeah, like a lot of Colin's interactions here were only about him. And he found them increasingly unsatisfying.
I guess in a sense, then the turn with Penelope is that this interaction that is not about him.
Or it's not just about him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, okay, that's fair. It's not just about him. And that's where he was also finding pleasure. That makes a lot of sense. Was there anything else in particular about what was happening in the carriage scene that stood out to you? Because we pointed to kind of the fact that it's like, yes, it's explicit, but also there's a lot of ruffles and clothing and all that kind of stuff. The focus on Penelope's pleasure, though I do think Colin did get something out of it. There were a lot of screenshots of his face when she runs her hand through his hair.
Oh, yeah.
But what else jumped out to you about this sequence?
Something that I think I kind of liked about it that I thought was funny. So we talked a lot in our first episode about things that weren't quite working for us about Penelope and Colin. But something that I did like and thought was very funny was that Penelope had been in love with Colin for years, and Colin is in love with Penelope for 5 minutes and has a complete breakdown.
And it's like, welp, I gotta marry her now. This is the only option.
Yeah, like that takes like... That was very funny. I liked that sort of, like, tempo difference that they had, which, yeah.
I'm going to say something crass. I do hope he washed his hands before running in to, like, hug all of his family after the marriage announcement.
Much note was made on Tumblr and Twitter of when Colin pulls Penelope's sleeve back up, the fingers that he used. He's very considerate, Colin.
He is. He's a considerate gentleman. That's why I hope he just did a quick, like, they didn't have hand sanitizer back then, but just a quick little, like, wash up before being like, here, Mom, I'm going to give you a sturdy pat on the back with this hug. These are the important things that academics talk about.
Yep. Sanitation. Okay, but so did the carriage scene generally work for you then as, like, this, I don't know, beginning of their relationship, turn in their relationship as sexy?
Yeah. Yeah, I like the carriage scene. I thought the carriage scene was sexy. And I think if we want to kind of use that to transition to the mirror scene, I think because they were separated by months, or by a month, they are kind of an interesting juxtaposition, right? I like the carriage scene. I like kind of like the frenetic, hungry nature of it. The fact that they're just like, well, we got to do this right now because I'm just so into you.
Yeah, it was like a dam breaking almost.
Which could also be a fun sex pun. But I think in contrast, the mirror scene was much calmer. It did not have the same kind of like, I've got to have you right here and now energy of the carriage. And, returning to some of what we said in part 1, I'm wondering if it would have had a bigger impact on me if I had watched them in close succession.
Yeah.
Right?
So for some context.
Go ahead.
The mirror scene, which I think is something that is being recreated from the book, the carriage scene and the mirror scene are, I think, specifically like iconic scenes from the book. It's the day after Colin and Penelope are engaged. Penelope's mother, Lady Featherington, has just been like, what the fuck are you doing? Mr. Bridgerton is so far above you. Like, Lord Debling was a sure thing. Colin Bridgerton is very much not. Like, this is absurd of you. And then Colin comes in and overhears it. She's like, no, I'm marrying her because I love her. She did not entrap me. And then he takes her away, and it's like the first time that someone has stood up for Penelope in front of her mother, I think, is what we are supposed to get from that.
And also the first time Colin has said out loud that he loves her.
Yeah. Which I think he thought she would get from the carriage thing, but,
I mean, just because you, what would you say? Just because you get a hand job doesn't mean you're in love?
And then he takes her to show her, like, this new place where they can live after they get married. And then they have sex.
Why did you say it like that?
I don't know. That's what happened.
No, you're right. I was just unprepared.
But it's like there's this whole like thing where he's like, "Oh, you're beautiful" or whatever, and they're standing in front of a mirror, and then he takes her clothes off, and then he takes his clothes off, and then they have sex
on what, the Chase Lounge?
On like a divan or something.
Yeah,
on a couch.
When we were texting about this, right? It's funny. I texted you that we were going to need to talk about this when I was watching the way that the camera was lingering on the way Colin was unbuckling his belt.
Okay.
There was something to me that was particularly eroticized about the way that he was taking off his clothes that was more compelling to me than the way he took off her clothes.
Yeah, something about the timing of the way he took off her clothes didn't work for me. Like, I didn't like... I don't know, it didn't feel equal to me that she was naked first. And it was also way too easy for him to take off her dress. Like, I needed more buttons or something.
No, girl, it's Velcro. It's fine.
I needed the buttons, is what I'm saying. And then, like, it showed, like, the ties on her corset, but it took all of half a second for him to get that undone. I was like, absolutely not. That is a process. Anyway.
But in contrast, his undressing was more of a process, right? They lingered on him taking off his shirt, right? There was a lingering on the belt and the removing of the pants. So there was more of this. I almost wonder if their undressing almost in a way relates to how they came into the relationships, right? So Colin wanted Penelope fast. He was like, I want her, we're getting married. So her undressing was quick, but then Penelope has been lingering for so long that the way he was undressing was this kind of slow, more not deliberate, but like it was a much slower paced process, it felt like to me. It kind of like lingered in the yearning.
It also, I think, had more of an audience that is attracted to men in view, I think. Like, in the way it did, like, linger on, like, his chest and on, like, that sort of thing. Yeah. I don't know. I guess, full disclosure, the first time, as I kind of said last episode, the first time I saw the mirror sequence sex scene, it didn't work for me that well because it felt too fast. And it felt, and I didn't get the urgency about, like, why they needed to have sex, like, right then. But when I went back and rewatched a little bit of episode 4 right into episode 5, it worked for me better.
That's interesting. So I'm gonna put another take in our director's cut of Bridgerton. I wonder how it would feel if Penelope undressed herself and Colin undressed himself, or if there was more of a like feedback between the two of them undressing each other.
Yeah, because once they started like making out, they were interacting more. It felt less like Penelope was a doll. Maybe that's part of why I didn't like it. I don't know. It's just something about it wasn't hitting for me.
You know, it's interesting because one of the things that I did want to talk to you about with this sequence was how Colin was walking her through the process, right?
Yeah.
And how he was very communicative and was like, so it's gonna hurt a little bit, but hopefully this is like the only time that it will hurt, and da-da-da-da-da-da. But he didn't, that kind of communicative nature was not there in the undressing, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are ways that you could have had the two of them interacting more in those sequences, be it like Colin, you know, talking her through taking off her clothes, or like kissing on her, and like, you know, is this, I not to overdo it, not like, is this okay every time he takes like a lace off, but I think there are ways that it could have been more interactive than just her kind of standing there naked in front of the mirror, right? It was, you know what's funny? And feel free to disagree with me here, but it almost felt like the camera didn't know what to do to show her as sexy. That balance between sexy and sexualized, right?
Yeah.
That, like, with Colin, it was like, oh, yeah, this is kind of more for the male admiring gaze. But, like, it was avoiding the female admiring gaze while she
Like,
was
we
standing there.
we did get, like, a moment of Penelope, like, naked and, you know, seeing her breasts exposed, and we got, like, a second of that. But I don't feel like we got as much of it as we get with Daphne or Kate. I could be embellishing that in my memory, but I
don't remember.
I don't remember enough to, like, say that with, like, full confidence.
Yeah.
But, like, I just don't feel like we got as much of it with Penelope, and I wish we got... not that I want her to be sexualized, but I would like it to be more admiring.
Yeah. And that's what I think maybe was not there, is that it was not admiring, perhaps, in that sequence, the way that the camera was admiring of Colin.
Yeah, I maybe also thinking back on, like, all the seasons of Bridgerton together, I am a little bit weary of the experienced man and the virginal woman.
Oh, you want to speak on that a little bit more?
It's just like, there's nothing wrong with that as, like, a setup, but it just feels like that's what we keep getting. Like, we got it with Daphne. They didn't linger on that quite as much with Kate. Like, they didn't tell us that Kate had a sexual history, but she just seemed like she knew more what was going on.
Oh, yeah.
But then we get that again with Charlotte, that she, like, doesn't quite know. And then she, like, you know, goes to, like, Lady Danbury and, like, figures it out or whatever. But, like, I don't know. I would like the man to be a virgin for once, I guess.
Well, we won't get that with Benedict.
No, we will not. Well, we're not going to get it with Eloise's partner either. Like...
Oh, I know nothing about Eloise's partner, so, you know.
I won't say, but if they go with the books. But, like, I don't know. I don't, it was nice. I liked the way that, like, Colin was very communicative, but I am also a little bit tired of women not quite knowing what's going on.
So I know that on the outline you have Francesca and thinking about Francesca and John next. However, I actually think this would be a great time to talk about Lady Tilly Arnold and her relationship with Benedict, because Benedict is not virginal by any stretch of the imagination, but their relationship was a lot about opening minds and new experiences.
That's true. Okay, really quickly before we shift to Benedict, I want to say really quickly, because we've kind of gone back and forth on Penelope and Colin's mirror scene. I do think I was missing one more sex scene from them in the show. Because, like, we get a moment after Penelope, like, reveals that she's Lady Whistledown and all that happens, and then, like, there is all that, like, tension in their relationship, but, like, I needed one more, like, full-length sex scene between Penelope and Colin when everything was good.
Oh, okay. I was like, could it have been angry sex?
No, I needed one when they were married, and also, like, their relationship is, like, a period at the end of the show.
Got it. Okay, that's fair. In the director's cut, we'll put it in there.
Okay.
But actually, I know I said we should transition, but before we transition, I just wanted to kind of put a final pin on our conversation about Penn and Lady Whistledown.
Okay.
Because I did mention in the last episode that was a push and pull that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
And, you know, as two women who writing and words are very important to us, I was just curious how you felt about how all of that wrapped up.
I was ultimately okay with it, but at the same time, it felt a little bit hand-wavy to me. Okay, so for context, ultimately, Colin finds out Penelope is Lady Whistledown before they get married. Then they get married and are sleeping in separate places and are clearly, like, not okay, but have decided to get married. I don't know. Their relationship is, like, not quite worked out. Penn is basically blackmailed into needing to reveal that she's Lady Whistledown publicly, because also the Queen is on her tail. So she basically gives this whole public speech saying that she is Lady Whistledown and she's sorry for the harm that she caused. She will write more responsibly. There you go.
Right. Which I will say I appreciated the kind of through line of her, like, realizing that she has used her power poorly in the past, and that her positionality does not excuse her bad actions, But the dressmaker, whose name I'm not remembering at the moment, had this great line about like standing in the honesty of your truth, but moving forward towards like being a better person. So like not trying to say, oh, well, what I did in the past, you know, we could just forget about that, right? Like acknowledging that what you've done, you know, might not have been the best, but that doesn't mean that you can't keep moving forward and being a better version of yourself. And I really liked that kind of through line in thinking about Penn and Whistledown, because she had done some fucked up stuff. You know, so
yeah. So how did it work for you, Ayanni, as like a, because we said at the beginning that it felt like a show about Penelope and her development, almost more than a romance. So what do we think in the end of Penn and her development?
You know, almost. So I enjoyed Penn's development, but I feel like the Lady Whistledown piece maybe like needed a bow tied on it, and so a bow was tied on it. You know?
Yeah.
I feel like it could have gone a lot worse. I'm happy that it didn't, and that Penn's not miserable, right? But I am curious. Like, I know the show is not about Penn, right? But what I would want is another season where Penn is now, everyone knows that she's Lady Whistledown, like she's Dear Abby or something, right? And she has to deal with the fact that a lot of the Ton isn't happy about that. You know what I mean? And what kind of stress does that put on the marriage now that Colin is like, you know, I accept you for the brilliant and beautiful writer that you are, right? Like, that's what I would want to see, is that because the queen came out and was like, this is fine, nobody's gonna mess with her at the ball, right? But she kind of sowed the seeds of the fact that that doesn't mean that everything will be hunky-dory. And I think because I won't get that, I doubt I'm going to get that, it feels like, I don't know, it feels a little too neat for me.
Yeah, so I guess maybe then, I agree with you that, like, it depends on where they go from here. Because a lot of what gave Lady Whistledown her power was being able to write things bitingly from a place of anonymity. And now that Penelope no longer has that as a shield, will that affect what she knows?
Right.
Will that affect, like, what people reveal to her? How will that affect even what she has access to be able to write about in the first place?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And importantly, what are they going to do about the Julie Andrews voiceover?
I don't know, because it did switch to Penn at the end, so I have no idea.
Like, what are we gonna? That's just like the vibe. I don't know what we do without that.
It is iconic. Yeah, I have no idea. Oh no. I hadn't even really thought of that. Oh boy. Now I have to do some Googling. We'll have to see what Julie Andrews says.
Yeah, so I guess we're momentarily okay with it, but it remains to be seen what they do with it next.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, so Benedict.
Our favorite Bridgerton.
We do love Benedict. I really enjoyed his little side plot this season, in part because I really, really liked Lady Tilly Arnold, who was played by Hannah New. I thought she was so much fun, that she's kind of she's a widow, right? But very intelligent. She's going to these talks about science. She's going to the theater. She's like a really cultured and interesting woman.
An independent woman.
Yeah. And I was reading her as a little older than like Benedict and that class of Bridgertons.
Yeah, I'll allow it. She's not like Lady Danbury and Violet's generation.
No. So like if Lady Danbury's in her 60s, Violet's supposed to be in her like mid to late 40s. I was viewing Tilly as late 20s, early 30s.
Oh, I was reading her as like mid to late 30s.
Ah, interesting. I think I am bad at knowing how old people are supposed to be in Bridgerton, because they have all of these people who are in their 30s playing teenagers. And I'm like, well, she looked like a grown woman, but maybe Bridgerton age logic.
Yeah.
But there was significant, regardless, in my head, I was viewing there being a significant age difference between her and Benedict, because Benedict is supposed to be in his young 20s, right? So
I don't think he's that young.
How old is Ben? All right. Hold on.
Well, because Antony was like, Because we have Antony, Benedict, Colin, Daphne, and Daphne got married 2 seasons ago and came out when she was like between 16 and 18. So Benedict is at least late 20s.
Okay, so Benedict is... Okay, no. I don't want to know how old the actor is.
How old is the actor?
He's 35.
Okay, he's age appropriate for us.
Oh, I mean, hey. So Reddit 3 months ago says that Benedict was 26 in the pilot draft and Antony is 28 in the pilot.
Okay, so Benedict is like late 20s now then.
Late 20s. Okay, then yeah, the point is that I viewed Tilly as being at least 7 to 10 years older than Benedict. So not as old as his mama, right? But not the same kind of rabble that he's been around, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I kind of loved that representation in Bridgerton, that she's not like, 18 and on the marriage market for the first time, that she's been around the block a couple times, but is desirable and beautiful and can kind of hold her own.
Yeah. So for some context, they meet at a hot air balloon exhibition, and
that goes horribly wrong.
That was a nice little sequence there, actually. I liked that scene. I think I have forgotten some of the things I liked about part 1 because of the break between part 1 and part 2. But anyway, they meet at that, and then Benedict, I don't remember if it was if they meet at another ball after that, but he eventually shows up at Tilly's house and is like, I'm here to call on you. And she's like, is that all you're here to do? And then they fuck.
I think she said, I don't want someone to call on me. And I was like, it's going down.
But then this is where it gets interesting, is that that was already interesting. It gets more interesting in part 2 when Lady Tilly introduces Benedict to her friend Paul, who it turns out maybe swings both ways and is interested to see. They basically want to know.
Maybe, she says.
Maybe. So, I mean, Benedict got unicorn hunted. That's what happened.
He really did. Well, hold on. Wait a minute. I don't think Tilly set out to be like, yes, I'm going to find this potentially bi man in the crowd and bring him home to my Paul. I think they were having their situation, that she kind of liked him for who she was, and then was like, oh, maybe he's a little, maybe it could work. So I don't think it's like when you're on an app and it's like, me and my husband are looking for,
No, okay. For listeners who don't know, unicorn hunting is a term largely used for a heterosexual couple that is looking for a bisexual woman to join them, to become their third. The times that it's done that make me deeply unhappy are when it's done without being honest about what they're looking for. So when it's the woman on there and then being like, oh, by the way, now that we're at dinner, what if my partner comes?
Yeah, what if my husband,
And it was that surprise, actually, to me that made me so Tilly basically holds a dinner to introduce Benedict to Paul that initially felt like it was Paul seeing what he thinks of Benedict to see if he's good enough for Tilly. But then Paul is a little bit flirty with Benedict.
A little bit.
Okay, a lot of bit flirty with Benedict. Then he sees Paul and Tilly kissing, and then he flees. But it's that subterfuge, I think, that made it feel a little bit But then Benedict ends up deciding that he's okay with it, and then we have a number of very interesting threesome sex scenes.
So I totally hear what you're saying, but I feel like what the plan would have been if he did not catch them kissing was to have an adult conversation about whether he would be interested or not. I don't think she was just being like, and by the way, when we have sex tonight, Paul will join us. I think there was going to be a conversation.
More consent.
Yeah. I want to give her the benefit of the doubt for that, And but then Benedict decides, you know what, why not? I'll give it a go. And then he quite enjoys himself and his world is expanded. But one of the things I actually wanted to talk about with the sex scenes, or with the threesome sequences, is that I found it quite interesting that they chopped them up so much. and use them as kind of like transitional scenes to move
Yeah,
from one
they
beat
were
of the plot to the other.
They were sprinkled throughout so much so that, like, there's, like, a moment where, like, Colin is gonna have to ask Benedict for some money for the whole blackmail thing, whatever. But they kept sprinkling it in with scenes of Benedict and Tilly and Paul in bed, to the point where I was like, is Colin gonna be able to find Benedict to ask him for money? Like, is he coming home?
Benedict is otherwise occupied. He's never returning, actually. This is his life now. But I will say, I feel like that was a real decision, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about it, because with a lot of these other scenes, we get the scene, right?
Yeah. And here it was more like we get a montage, sort of.
Right, but it's not even like a montage, because when I think sex scene montage, I go back to season 1 with the Duke and Daphne just having sex all over the house, and the grounds, I should say. They were outside a couple times. And so, like, that wouldn't be... We didn't get, like, a deep dive into each of those sequences, but it was a lot of them over this period of time, whereas this, it was more like, here's 5 seconds, okay, we're going back to this ball, or whatever. So that... I don't know. I wasn't quite sure what they were trying to get from us by giving us these bite-sized moments of this threesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in Bridgerton, sex is used a lot to talk about character, deepen character relationships, and all that kind of stuff. But if we're just getting these little snippets, then I don't know if it's doing that same kind of work, right? So I guess I'm still trying to wrap my brain around, like, why they were doing it this way. And it's not that they didn't build, but, you know.
Thinking about it comparably, it maybe compares to, like, Antony's relationship with his opera singer in season 1, where we didn't really get extended sex scenes with him and whatever her name was, but it developed Antony's character and set him up for season 2. And I wonder if we're being set up, or how we are being set up to see Benedict when we get to his season. Because I don't know if they're going to go with Benedict, Francesca, or Eloise for season 4.
You don't think we'll get a combination again?
Well, I don't think we'll get... Well, there's normally, like, the central love story, right? Like, I don't think they would split, like, Eloise. I don't think they would have, like, Eloise and Francesca split a season. I don't think that would be fair. Because, with Francesca, like, this isn't Francesca's season.
No.
Like, this is setting Francesca up for her future. Like, her book is not about Lord Kilmartin. It's about someone else. So...
No, I was rooting for her and Lord Kilmartin the entire time. I love John.
Oh, I also love John. Okay, book spoilers. So if people want to, like, go ahead 30 seconds. Do you want the book spoilers, Ayanni?
I guess I'm going to get them.
Francesca is a widow in her book.
Oh, they kill my John.
Ayanni's having a moment here.
Oh man, I really liked him.
Okay, we will get to Francesca. Circling back, we will get to Francesca. Right now we were talking about Benedict. I think it is interesting that they finally committed to making him bisexual, and I think doing it in this threesome way is very interesting. Ayanni has her lower lip stuck out. She's pouting so much about this revelation.
Back to Benedict. Well, is Benedict bi in the books? Because I have no book knowledge.
None of them are queer in the books. And, well, okay. They have also, the showrunners have also been, like, floating, like, someone's gonna be queer, and we're gonna have a queer season, and everyone thought it was gonna be Eloise, and it turned out, Benedict is bisexual now, which I like. For some reason, Facebook has been showing me posts of people who don't like it, and are like, why are they shoving queer stuff down my throat? I would like it, keep doing it, give me more of it, please.
I mean, also, wasn't he, like, sleeping with men in season 1?
He was certainly participating in an orgy where that was going on.
Oh, okay. I was like, he's with them too. Everybody's with everybody in the orgy. I'm sorry. Go on.
It's good. But it ended up being, okay, this is the other thing. Again, this is, I guess, a book Easter egg, so forward 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it. But book Francesca has a romance with Lord Kilmartin's cousin, Michael. not
Mhm.
Michaela,
Oh.
who we
Oh.
met at the end of season 3.
So you know what's funny is that in my head I was shipping her and Eloise. This is what happens when you don't read the book. I was like, there's Eloise's lesbian. I found her. No. I'm just shipping whoever I want to ship, apparently. Totally fine.
All right, I think we've maybe lost the thread here, so...
We were talking about Benedict, and now lesbians. I think that's the thread. I think it's totally fine. So since we brought up Francesca, I think why don't we transition to thinking about her and Lord Kilmartin and how that all played out this season, because I will say I was rooting for them the entire time. Like, I might not have been all in on Polin right away, but like as soon as they stood outside together silently, I was like, marry that man. Like I was on board. So
for context, Lady Francesca is another Bridgerton sibling. She's characterized and played as potentially a little bit neurodivergent, I think, in a way that's really interesting. She is sometimes overwhelmed by her family and how much just how much they are, because there are so many of them. But she becomes the queen's sparkler of the season rather than her diamond, because the queen is, I don't know, the queen is doing her own Lady Whistledown thing that is...
She's going through it.
Yeah. But Francesca is like set up with someone by the queen and it seems fine, but then she ends up meeting Lord Kilmartin, who... their thing is not talking, which I think is interesting.
It's being quiet together, right? Which I think is more important than the not talking. I think a lot of people outside, right, like her mother, just see them not talking. And it's like, it's weird, but really what it is they can enjoy the peace together. Yeah. And I think that for me, I was like, oh, I totally get it. Yes.
Yeah, well, he's like a person that doesn't take her people energy. That's what it is.
Yep. And that's, for me, as soon as I was like, girl, that's the one. That's the one. When you find the one who doesn't zap all of your energy, yes. Because she also gets overwhelmed at the balls, right? It's not just her family. It's like these places of high activity and the expectation of like maintaining conversation all the time and having to be pleasant and
she's masking.
Yeah,
like,
for
she
sure.
She can do it. She's very skilled at it, but it's exhausting to her. So she wants to hurry up and get married so she doesn't have to keep doing it.
Yeah, though I will say what was interesting, the thing that really put her off about the suitor that the queen wanted to hook her up with was like, yes, I want to have lots of children. It'll be a big, loud family. And she was like, excuse me for a moment, I need to go. So, like, the thought of having a bunch of loud, rambunctious kids was just she couldn't even like handle in that moment. But yeah, I felt like her and Lord Kilmartin really understood each other really well, but also, I should say, they came to understand each other. I appreciated those little moments of like where their differences created tiny bits of friction.
Yeah, they still did need to figure out how to communicate with each other.
Yeah. But once they did, I was like, this is great. I just wanted their happiness, honestly, this entire season. Yeah, and I also appreciated the way that Lord Kilmartin became integrated with some of the other kind of like family hangouts. He ended up spending a lot of time with Colin and, was that Benedict that they would drink with?
Colin, Benedict, and Will.
Yeah, and Will Mondrich. And I really kind of appreciated that little group of 4. I thought they were very sweet.
It was a much healthier friend group than Colin's former drinking buddies.
I loved them. Did you have anything in particular you wanted to say?
I also loved them, and I think they are another thing that kept the season going for me when Penelope and Colin didn't as much.
Yeah. Really quickly, I don't think we said the actors' names. Francesca is played this season by Hannah Dodd, and then Lord Kilmartin is played by Victor Ali.
Hats off to them. They did a great job.
They did. Lord Kilmartin made me cry a couple times, so, yeah.
Yeah, and another character that was developed further this season, who we've always loved, but I think was developed in part because of how she was concerned about how Francesca's relationship was developing, was Lady Violet Bridgerton.
Yes.
Played by Ruth Gummel.
I've been really interested in Violet, honestly, since Queen Charlotte. I think, again, even though it's technically like a side season, I think Queen Charlotte did a lot to make some of the characters who were kind of more in the background very interesting. And I feel like that carried through into this season. So Lady Violet Bridgerton is definitely one of them. The concept of her garden needing some tending to is one that carried through into this season with an interesting gentleman by the name of Lord Anderson, who's played by Daniel Francis, who is Lady Danbury's younger brother. And Lady Danbury is played by Ajoa Ando. And I really enjoyed that dynamic this season. I think one of the things we talked about, and correct me if I'm wrong because you went back and actually listened to our episodes, but one of the things we talked about in the Queen Charlotte episode is the way that there was attention paid to kind of the relationships of older women, both between each other, but then also thinking about, like, you know, just because you turn 40 doesn't mean suddenly you're not a sexual being anymore, right?
Yeah, so I think something that is interesting there is, we're set up to think that, or to be ready for Violet to have another romance because of a lot of that groundwork laid in Queen Charlotte. But I think something that is also important there is that Francesca and Lord Kilmartin's relationship sort of broadens Violet's perception of what romantic love and attraction can look like, because she had a very much like love at first sight situation with her husband. Like they were a love match, which we are set up to think is very rare in this world, although that's all we ever see on screen.
Every season, though. Like, I'm not convinced.
Well, and like her goal is for all of her children to have love matches if she can manage it. But she has a very narrow perception of what love looks like. And she doesn't necessarily try to stop Francesca, but she isn't convinced. And I actually, so my one of my friends, she said that to her, Lady Violet was the most annoying character this season because she was too much in favor of like toxic love at first sight situation. But also, like, I do think it's interesting that Lady Violet doesn't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
She is still learning that her experience of love is not how everyone's experience looks.
And I really like that you're bringing that up, because I appreciate this season in particular seeing the foibles of our older characters.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, Violet has this whole situation with Francesca and Kilmartin, right? And their relationship not living up to some expectations she's built up in her head. But we also have Lady Danbury working through her negative feelings towards her brother that she's held on to for like, what, 50 years, right?
Yeah, since her marriage. When
maybe,
he was
maybe
10.
40 years. Yeah. You know, and to give some context for that, when she tried to escape from being married to her horrible, terrible husband, who we do talk about in our Queen Charlotte episode, her brother is apparently the one who, I'm putting quotes around this, but like ratted her out. But because she was so tied up in the negativity that was happening to her, and rightfully so, I'm not saying that she is wrong for being upset about having to marry that terrible man. She didn't ever think about things from his perspective because one, he's the firstborn son, so automatically became favored in her father's eyes, but also was the one that stopped her from being able to get away. And they, after many decades, have finally had a moment to talk about, like, one, that she's kind of being unfair to a 10-year-old for being like, oh no, my sister might be in danger, right? But also that holding on to this grudge for so long does nothing for her, right? Yeah. So I personally really enjoyed watching that through line. I honestly could have spent more time with them and had more time with them trying to work through their sibling relationship.
Yeah, I think thinking about the show's pacing as a whole, I feel like if they're going to give us a main romance and also try and give us these side stories, I like the side stories. I would like to keep the side stories, but I think they need more than 8 episodes.
I would agree, especially not split in half, so it's really just 4 and 4.
Yeah. Bridgerton is expanding beyond its original bounds, and I think we're feeling some of the growing pains.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree with you. I wouldn't want them to cut down on the side stories, but like, I can understand the critiques that maybe it made things feel a little bit tight. I feel like a lot of these stories perhaps needed a little bit more elbow room to breathe.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for example, I really enjoyed Anthony and Kate being like, man, this family's a lot. We're just going to go keep honeymooning. And then they'd come back and they'd, like, sprinkle some stuff in and then leave. But, like, that's the kind of side story you can do when things are really cramped.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, because, like, Anthony and Kate's stuff really is fairly resolved. They're not real. It's nice to see them, and I love checking in with them, and we got some, like, sexy time early on, which was much needed. But, like, there
Except
wasn't...
for the time when the dog was watching.
I mean, very, very fair. But, like, that wasn't... It was a bonus. It wasn't, like, a tension that needed to be resolved.
Yeah. So we've kind of worked our way through a lot of these main relationships, right? But once you finish a Bridgerton season, the thing that is automatically on your top of your head is, well, what's coming up next? What's going to be the next season of Bridgerton? So what are you thinking about for either season 4 or like another side kind of series like Queen Charlotte? Is there something that you'd really want to see or absolutely not want to see?
So I desperately want this show to continue long enough for me to get Benedict's season. I don't know, because there was enough discontent with this season. I think I'm sure they're renewed, but like it can't go on indefinitely. And no. I'm curious to see how many Bridgertons we get through. And I hope we get to Benedict.
Yeah. I don't need Hyacinth or Gregory, but like if we could get to Benedict, that'd be great.
I need Benedict and I need Eloise, and now I also need Francesca, actually. So another thing, like thematically, that I continues to sit uncomfortably for me, and I don't know how much I need them to engage with it, is these questions of racism and colonialism.
Yeah, I mean, like, we complained about it in season 1 when Lady Danbury was like, love fixes all the racism. And I was like, throw it away. I never want to hear about this again.
And then we complained about it more in Queen Charlotte.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, the thought of, I think what we specifically said that I continue to be uncomfortable about is the Black aristocracy being funded by slavery, the way that the aristocracy was at the time. Like, that's weird. And then another, like, mostly, I prefer them not to think about it, because I would like to not think about it, because I don't think the Bridgerton universe is really equipped to do so enough. But, like, another moment where I was like, oh, I don't know about that, is when Kate and Anthony were going back to India, and I was like, is it a colony right now? Like, what's the situation there?
Like, Bridgerton really falls apart when it intersects with real life. Because, like, of course there were, you know, Black families that had money from enslavement. Like, that's a thing that happened. You know, not often, not all the time, but it exists, right?
Well, yeah, and they just don't address slavery at all in Bridgerton. Yeah. And I don't want them to, but, like, it's also there in the back of my head.
Yeah, and it's, like, it's also, like, the layers of racism and colonialism. So, like, can you touch on... So, like, for example, I thought there were some interesting things that were done in Queen Charlotte about, like, you know, solidarity between Black families, you know, and things like that. But then can you have that conversation without it reaching down to, like, the legacies of slavery in the Regency period? I don't know. So, like, can you go to India and have a fun, like, we're in India with my wife's family and I'm part of the English aristocracy, and why do you all speak English? Like, you know, can you... It's like, why is no one speaking their original home languages? It's just like, you know, so I don't...
All that to say, we continue to be uncomfortable when we think about it a little too hard.
Yeah. And it's like, I both want it and don't want it, right? Because I agree with you. I don't know if Bridgerton can withstand those deep probing questions.
Yeah.
And I think I'll be upset if they try to do a love-saved colonialism. So, like, you
Please don't. If anyone I can't. I'm too tired. I can't.
So we are maintaining a sense of trepidation about what will be next in season 4, but are looking forward to more love matches and honestly more of Kate and Anthony because I really like them. I think they're a very hot couple together, and because we don't get the Duke anymore, I'm glad we get them together at least.
Yes, I hope they have the contracts with the actors ironed out now to have the former seasons couples come back, because I like that.
I like
seeing that they're good.
That they're happy, and that Anthony's a little doofy about how much he loves his wife, so that's good. And I'm curious to see what goes on with Lady Whistledown next season.
All in all, we like Bridgerton. It's not without its problems, but we will continue to tune in.
Yeah, we'll probably do an episode about season 4 when it comes out, as long as we can still record things on microphones.
Yeah,
we'll be good to go. So what do we have coming up in the future?
So
of our sex love literature.
We have a couple of things. One is we have 2 remaining installments in our divorce series. This was a little break in that.
Important one.
We will get to that. We also have an upcoming collaboration with the podcast Ivory Tower Boiler Room, hosted by Andrew Rimby, which should be fun. We're going to do a trope spotlight episode, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we haven't done one of those in a little while, so that'll be nice.
Yeah.
So we have those coming up, and if you want to hear about when those episodes go live or watch our Instagram stories, which we share a lot of random things, or, just want to tell us about your feelings about this season of Bridgerton, you can find us on Instagram and Threads at SexLoveLit, and you can also find us on Tumblr at SexLoveLit Podcast, where we are sharing a lot of Bridgerton-related gift sets.
And you can also see whatever K-drama or C-drama I'm at that moment obsessed with on the Tumblr account. That is where I channel that energy.
Sometimes I look and I'm like, oh, when did we post all of these gift sets? Oh, within the last, 2 minutes? Cool, okay. Nice. Thank you so much for tuning in to this deep dive of Bridgerton Season 3, and we'll see you next time.
All right, bye!